Welcome into episode 3 of the Draft Geeks podcast. Thank you guys so much for the support on the first two. If you guys are new, make sure you follow us on both Apple and Spotify, and you can head over to YouTube for the video version of this if you guys are interested. But we're going to be talking about top 25 draft big board today. Really excited to get into this. So without further ado, the Draft Geeks podcast starts right now.
Welcome into episode 3 of the Draft Geeks podcast. I'm Max Shostak over at the Draft Geek on Instagram. Jason and I are really excited today to bring you guys the first edition of our big boards. It's just top 25, so not in too much depth, but we're going to get into depth about the guys that we think are the top prospects in this draft class. So, both sides of the ball, we're going to cover a lot of players, probably more than 25. I'd assume there's going to be some guys on my board that Jace doesn't have, vice versa. But yeah, really excited to get into it. Jace, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm excited, man. It's a base big board, and I think we talked about it before. Like, most of these guys are probably our top 25 players. The order will change, and maybe there's one or two more guys that will jump in, but we've watched most of the top guys in this class. So these top 25 guys are who we believe are, in our opinions, first round talents, or maybe, first and second round talents. And then we'll kind of shuffle it around once we get through the combine and more film and stuff like that. But no, I'm really excited to talk about these guys and see where we compare on both of these.
Yeah, so we're going to go in increments of 5 here. So we'll start at 25. I'll go first. I'm going to read my 25 through 21. And then Jace is going to read his top 25 to 21. We'll share any, reactions we might have to somebody that might be too high, might be too low in our opinions. And then, of course, we're going to cover, similar players. I had him here. And then we'll go over each player a little bit individually and perhaps spend some more time on the guys that are, maybe too high or too low in each of our opinions. So I'll start us off right here. 25, my number 25 player on my big board is Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State. And that starts a little bit of an offensive tackle run for me in this stretch. Then I'm going to go 24 is Josh Conerly, offensive tackle out of Oregon. Number 23 for me is Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. That'll be the only quarterback on my top 25. Number 22 is Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. And then number 21 is Armand Membou, the offensive tackle out of Missouri.
I got to ask you about one, and it's the running back position. It's Omarion Hampton. I love Omarion Hampton. I have him at 31 on my big board right now. I've only gotten through 35, so he has made my big board so far. I love Omarion Hampton's, play style, how he, has fared the last couple of years at the North Carolina, but I don't know. Give me your thought process, because in my opinion, I'm guessing you have 2 running backs in your top 25 because Genty's going to be up there.
Two running backs, yeah.
So, give me your kind of what you're thinking there, because I know the NFL does not view running backs that highly. So, I don't know. Give me your thought process on that one.
So for me, I've never been like a very big positional value guy on the big board. So my big boards are mostly going to be just like pure talent, who I think, the most talented guys are regardless of position. So that's part of why you see Cam Ward at 23. And that's not to like diss on people that have him at 10. It's just some guys, value positional value more on their big boards. But for me, it's Hampton at 22. I really like his running style, his vision. I think he's a powerful guy. But I also think he's got that, next gear to really, hit home runs, be that impactful RB1. And I think he's somebody that's going to go in the top 45. I put out a 2-round mock today. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on the Draft Geek on Instagram. But I have Hampton in the top 45. So I think he's kind of on a little island where he could sneak into the back half of the first round if a team needs the running back that bad, or be an early second round guy. But I really like the way that, he's just, you can give him the ball 25 times a game. He's got experience being a bell cow back. He was that for North Carolina this year. And he was that for North Carolina last year. You just didn't hear much about it because that was Drake May's team last year. And Omarion Hampton really elevated his game this year, in my opinion. And, I got him at 22 for those reasons.
Yeah, and you look at the stats. He's rushed for over 1,500 yards the last 2 seasons at North Carolina. Like, He has everything you want. He averaged 4.35 yards per attempt yards after contact per attempt. He was tied for fourth with 26 carries of 15 plus yards, and he had 1,222 yards after contact. If you look at pretty much every statistical category, he's number 2 or 3 behind either Ashton Genty or Cam Scatterbo, which those guys had 2 freakishly good years. So, I mean, Omarion Hampton, I love the talent. I have him at 31. I agree with you. I think that he's probably an early second round pick. Like when you talk about where Breece Hall went a couple years ago to the Jets, I could see a team reaching up, taking him. Who was it last year that got taken early? Jonathan Brooks in the second, right? He got taken early from Texas. So he could definitely sneak into that category with how productive and how good he has been. So I definitely agree with you that. Okay. You had Connerly at 24.
24 for Connerly.
Okay, so I'll go into mine because I have Connerly in this same range. So I have Jaden Higgins, Iowa State wide receiver at 25, Gray Zabel, North Dakota State interior offensive lineman at 24, Kenneth Grant, Michigan D tackle at 23, Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle from Oregon at 22, and Benjamin Morrison, the corner from Notre Dame at 21. So the only guy we kind of really have in that group is Connerly. We're close on him. I did a mock draft a couple days ago for the Patriots too. I think he's kind of boosted himself into the first round talent. Obviously, the 34-inch arm thing puts him in that true offensive tackle category, and it looks like there's not very many of those. But you talk about he was a basketball player in high school. The dude can move his feet. Like you get him with a good offensive line coach and you put a couple pounds on him, I think he could be a really good quality long-term starter at the left tackle position in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with you on Connerly. I mean, 24, might sound low for somebody we're giving a lot of praise to right now, but I think that's just kind of speaks to the rest of this draft class. I think Connerly is somebody that I'd feel comfortable trotting out there, left tackle, day one. And I don't think you're getting some like all-world, all-pro guy, but I think you're getting a steady offensive tackle who can really be, a cornerstone of your offensive line for a while. And I will say, of the guys that you just read off, Connerly and only one other guy is on my board. But I will touch on Gray Zabel because he's somebody I said before the show, somebody that's like kind of hovering in that 26 to 30 range that I could see coming in to the back half of the top 25. I haven't watched much of Gray Zabel game tape wise, just a lot of the Senior Bowl tape. And I think his position versatility along the interior offensive line is really interesting. And I think team need wise, there's going to be some teams, particularly Houston, the Texans in the back half of the first round, that I think will have Zabel much higher. Because if you look at the Texans on the interior, it's kind of a mess. So teams that need the interior offensive line, I think Zabel and Tyler Booker are two guys that are going to get drafted really high, because if you need guard, it's hard to do anything when you don't have interior offensive line. It's hard to run the ball. And if you're getting pressured up the middle, it's really hard to throw the ball. So Zabel's close for me. I'm glad that you got him in your top 25.
Yeah, and that's a guy I moved up just because of the Senior Bowl, right? Obviously, I had him in the interior offensive line category. It's definitely, he's one of those guys that you're like, okay, yeah, he played tackle at North Dakota State, but his measurements, he's going to be an interior offensive line. You saw him. He was able to snap the ball. He was able to play guard. I think he does a lot. And like you mentioned, the position versatility being like, hey, this could be a day one starter at left guard, but in a couple years, he could play at center, right? Talking about some of the teams in the back half that might need one of these offensive linemen in the interior. Most of these teams need one. Say the Lions want to get a little younger or something. They could easily throw in Gray Zabel at pick 28 and add him in there. So I threw him in there. Again, Tyler Booker is 30th for me. So Gray Zabel is actually my interior offensive lineman 2 in this class as of right now. But Tyler Booker does a lot of really good things too. I just, you didn't see much of him because he wasn't in the Senior Bowl. And, I thought Gray Zabel did a ton to help his draft stock there and stuff. But the other one, so you don't have Jaden Higgins in your top 25. Is he?
No,
is he
and
close?
I was going to let you, not really.
Really?
Well, listen, Jaden Higgins is my wide receiver 10.
Okay.
And I really like this wide receiver class. It's very compact to me. So 1 through 10, there's not that much of a gap. Obviously there's a gap because there's 10 guys in between that range. But Jaden Higgins is somebody that I'm comfortable taking in the second round. So that's 10 guys that I would be comfortable taking in the second round. And while there's not an elite talent at the top of the wide receiver class, if Travis Hunter said he was never playing corner again, then maybe I'd change that statement. But there's 10 guys that I'd be comfortable taking in the top 64. So you got to talk about Jaden Higgins first. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have him in the top 25,
yeah,
I got to dish it over to you because that's high praise for Jaden Higgins, a player who I really like. He and his teammate Jalen Knoll, who's not in my top 25, but he's my wide receiver 9. So just two talented players at Iowa State. Higgins, the bigger of the two, the outside receiver.
Yeah, no, I have Higgins, and guys, we will get into a more in depth. Like we'll go top 10 wide receiver rankings, running back stuff like that. So you don't have to remember like, oh, he put him at 10. We'll get those shows out. I have Higgins as wide receiver 5 right now. I love his frame, 6'4", 215 pounds. I'm trying to pull up his wingspan right here because when he measured at the Senior Bowl, it was ridiculously long. It was 6'7" and 3/8. He had 33.25 inch arms, like big, massive frame. His catch radius is going to be crazy long for whoever it is. He posted a 90.5 receiving grade this year. You go look at, some of his stats and stuff. Like he had a 2.2% drop rate, which was 6th best. Like he doesn't drop the ball, good size hands. He had over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. I thought the biggest thing for me that kind of put him in the top 25. Now, again, he's at 25, so he's not like all the way up there. But there was a couple clips of him in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl where his footwork and his ability to beat press with his quick feet and stuff should not be as good as it is for him being 6'4", 215 pounds. I just think his footwork, that type of stuff is really, really good for a guy his size. And so I really like him. You add in that footwork and that ability to get off a press with that frame and that catch radius and, a low drop rate. I think he's kind of like a Michael Pittman type receiver that could be a early 2nd round pick and could be, and wide receivers seem to come off the board late in the 1st round, like, offensive tackles do. So there could be 6 or 7 taken in front of him and he could be the 8th one coming off or whatever. But I really like him adding that frame, adding his quick feet, adding all those things that, I just mentioned. The couple things that are a knock on him, he's not the best after the catch and he doesn't force that many missed tackles, which I do get as a concern. But I think that he gets open. I think he runs a pretty good route tree and I think he's got really good feet to win at the line of scrimmage.
So when it comes to guys that I think can really translate and win as outside receivers at the next level, I think Higgins is the 3rd guy for me. Like I think you have Golden and McMillan, who we'll touch on a little later. I mean, I'm assuming you have Higgins over Golden.
I do.
But he profiles more as of an X, while Golden, I think, is more of a wide receiver 2 or a Z receiver. Listen, I really like Higgins. The after the catch is kind of what gets me a little bit, but his release is stupid, man. It makes no sense when you're watching it. He releases like his teammate, Jalen Knoll, who's right around 5'9" and, runs lightning fast. And Higgins is over there at 6'4", saying, look at me, I can do it too. So listen, I'm a big fan of his. It doesn't sound like it, but because, I got.
You're trashing on him, bro. You hate him.
I got guys like, there's Jack Best mixing in there. And then I kind of view, Jalen Royals from Utah State and Jalen Knoll from Iowa State in that kind of same tier as Higgins, but all really good players. So you had Kenneth Grant, who we'll touch on a little later.
Yep.
And who were the other guys?
So Benjamin Morrison was 21 for me.
Morrison. Yep. So I don't have Morrison in my top 25. And he's pretty close for me. I'm just really concerned about kind of the hip injury that, if you've seen Morrison preseason, you saw him going top 10 in mock drafts, and now he's not the most popular 1st round pick. And that's because of an injury to his hip. And that's, a lot of the cornerback position. I think we're batting 1,000 now on mentioning the Benjamin Morrison hip injury on our episodes here. But it's something that until it's cleared up, you're not going to see a lot of comfort in people giving Benjamin Morrison high praise. It's a great player, but it is a really tough injury to stomach for somebody that's, evaluating Benjamin Morrison. And I'm sure by April, we'll get a lot more clarity.
And I will say the 2 guys, I mean, I've Benjamin Morrison at 21. Obviously, he's way further down than what he was early in the process. I was debating on him and Savon Ravel as kind of in that range. They're both right there as my cornerbacks. Sorry, let me pull it up as cornerbacks 3 and 4, but they both sustained pretty big injuries, right? And so that's one that I think, hey, you might look back in a month or 2 when you find out more about the injury combine and stuff like that, and Morrison could slide even more. He's definitely on the scale of sliding downwards because of that injury. So I don't fault you at all for saying that. That's one thing I definitely considered, but I'm also like, hey, Morrison and the hip injury, Ravel and the ACL injury,
ACL.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like they both had crazy injuries, but they're both talent wise, if they're healthy, really,
Really
really
good.
good players.
Really good football players. And Ravel's not on my list either, but same reason,
Yeah.
just they're kind of in a group on my Excel sheet over here, just like the two of them and with their names in red. Like, would love to know more about how you're doing. So I'll go 20 to 16 here. A little bit more receivers. I had offensive tackles was kind of the theme for me on the first group. This one's going to be more receiver themed. We'll start it off with Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri. He's 20 for me. Number 19, this one should go over well. It's Tetero McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. Number 18 is Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle from Texas. Number 17 is Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. And number 16 is Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver from Miami, who I'm a big fan of and is pretty much my Jaden Higgins.
Yeah, and I know you're super high on Xavier Restrepo. I love him. I've said that I think he's this year's Ladd McConkey, where it's like he just gets it done. He's not going to wow you. I'm going to say it. I think it's kind of crazy that you have him over both McMillan and Luther Burden, which I will have them both in my top 10. So we will get to that from my point of view. But I guess you got to talk to me why you love Restrepo over McMillan and Luther Burden, because I feel like that's a hot take right there.
It's, listen, it's definitely a hot take. And Restrepo, somebody that I watched, I turned on the tape and I was like, whoa, we got to have a real conversation here. Because, 10 plays in, I think is when it started. And I was like, I'm not seeing that much of a difference between what I watched with, Egbuka and Burden in terms of slot receivers. And so he's on the smaller side. He's right around 5'9", 5'10", about 200 pounds. He's going to be a slot receiver. But when I watch somebody that is getting open really consistently, does not drop the football, he had 2 drops this year, and he blocks like every play is his last play. I just see somebody that can win in every offense and be a part of every single offense. So I think Xavier Restrepo, while you're not drafting this guy to be a number 1 wide receiver, you're getting an absolute badass who's going to block, he's going to get open, and he's not going to, burn you after the catch, but he's going to eat up yards after the catch. I feel like when people talk about yak, they kind of only really think, oh, there's the only guys that get yak are the burners. And like, no, Restrepo's not a burner, but he knows how to find space after the catch and position himself, to where he can catch the ball and move up the field. And so the frame and, you're not going to get the jump ball and the speed out of him, but I think you're getting everything else at a pro-ready level. I would be comfortable with Xavier Restrepo stepping into an NFL game tomorrow. And then I'll touch a little bit on it with Burden and McMillan. Burden, I didn't see the same, the blocking. You don't get the same thing out of Burden as you do with Restrepo. And I think Restrepo better routes. Obviously, they're close for me. I had Burden at 20, Restrepo at 16. And then McMillan at 19 is probably it might be a hotter take than Restrepo at 16. And McMillan is the number 1 outside receiver in the class. So when teams need receivers, it's usually they need outside receivers. That's why he's probably still going to be the first receiver off the board. I see all the potential with him. I'll be very clear. He's a super fast player, 6'5", great yak ability, good in jump ball situations. He can go up and get it. I also see seven drops. I see somebody that doesn't block as good as he should block for being a 6'5" receiver. And I don't love his route tree. I think he wins with those deep digs, kind of like Nico Collins style, and on those go balls and on routes where he's, given a lot of space to work underneath. But I don't think right now it's the most polished route tree. And I don't love his separation ability. So the separation kind of scares me. I don't think he, sells his way into creating separation as much as some of these more nimble slot guys do. And obviously that's body type. If you got a 6'5" guy that's creating nimble separation, and nimble with separation, we're talking Calvin Johnson here. So, nobody's Calvin Johnson here, but those are kind of my reservations with McMillan and Burden. And that's what kind of brings Restrepo into the same tier as them for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love Restrepo. I have him as wide receiver 6. He just missed my top 25. He's at 29. This is a guy, in my opinion, that he's 2 full inches shorter than Ladd McConkey, but I think he could test freakishly well in like the short shuttle, the pro agility, stuff like that, and jump his way into the top 25. But 2 full inches shorter, you kind of worry about that. I think he's just got such a defined, limited role in the NFL, being 5'9" and 3/8. He had 1,038 yards of his 1,127 yards were from the slot. Like the majority of his work comes from the slot. Now, that's going to be very specific for a lot of teams. Now, I love how you've brought this up, is receiver this year is kind of a pick your flavor. What do you want? What team's going to want what? So there's really no right or wrong answer. I just think it's hard for me to put him up there, because not that I don't think he's going to be a good NFL receiver. If I had to bet on someone that's going to be a staple in the NFL, I probably would put it on Restrepo. I know he's going to be great, but what's his ceiling in the NFL? Is it Teteroa McMillan if he reaches it? Is it Luther Burden if he reaches it? But I mean, Miami's all-time leading receiver with 2,844 yards in his career. Like what he does being available, and he was a huge part of why Cam Ward was so good this year. Is like he's always available for the quarterback. He makes himself open even when he's not. He's tough as nails over the middle of the field. So I do love Xavier Restrepo. I'm not disagreeing with you.
We see it.
It is a hot
we
take.
see it really similarly. Like for me, it's a lot about comfort, and a guy that I would bet on to succeed is him. And in a class with a lot of variability, like I'll make it clear, in a class with a lot more like security at the top, like when you had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and even Rome Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr., I was comfortable in their success. And at the top of this class, I'm like Egbuka. I think he's gonna, it's hard to see Egbuka fail for me, and Restrepo as well. And then I have a little bit more reservations about Burden, and then McMillan. I just hope he goes into an offense that can truly maximize him, because I do think that it's the worst word in the world, but I was gonna say BUST, which we'll probably refrain from ever saying on this podcast. Yes. But there's potential for, underachieving in the wrong offense, which is, I think, what you get when you have a guy that might struggle with separation sometimes. So it is a lot of pick your flavor, and it's kind of more of a comfort thing. Guys I would bet on are who I'm going with this year in the receiver class when it's all very close. So
yeah. And I mean, I guess the other one, and we'll talk about this because he'll be in my next grouping, Kelvin Banks Jr., you had 18
for me.
18.
Yeah.
So I mean, what is it mostly because he probably projects better as an interior guy? Is that mostly why?
It's that, and it's the foot speed a little bit where I think, and I think we'll both have Will Campbell higher, because it's another guy that I think I would bet on Will Campbell to succeed wherever he ends up playing over Kelvin Banks, and for me, it's honestly part of the fact that I think Kelvin Banks Jr. might start out as a tackle. And then I have the reservations about his foot speed and whether or not he can keep up with the NFL athletes outside on the edge. And so whether or not, he's going to survive out there. And I think he might be best suited as a guard. But I think that because of how much certain teams need tackle, that's where he'll probably play. So a lot of that is up in the air with the offensive line group this year. And so that's why I have Banks at 18. And I'll say it now, there's not going to be an offensive lineman in the top 10 for me. So
okay. I only have one in the top 10. So
yeah. And I have one that's very close to the top 10, and it's probably the same guy.
We'll see. I think you'll be shocked here.
Oh, I think I know who it is. It might be my guy who was at number 25.
It might be. So, okay. I'll give you my 20 through 16. So 20, I have Mykel Williams, Georgia edge rusher. 19, I have Armand Membu, the offensive lineman out of Missouri. 18, I have Shamir Stewart, the edge out of Texas A&M. 17, Jalen Walker, I'm going to tag him as the all defensive player of this draft, out of Georgia. And then I have your boy, which I know you'll talk about, Emeka Egbuka at 16 out of Ohio State, the wide receiver. So anyone, I mean, I know we were pretty close on Armand Membu, right? You had him at 21 or something.
21. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're, 2 off right there. I think that, I like Armand Membu. I think he's another one of those guys, like I talked about with Connor Lee, that just cemented himself with 34-inch arms. He is going to be a tackle. Like
real comfortable with him.
Comfortable with him there, right? Like there's a couple guys that you're like, oh yeah, he might, like Marcus Membo, probably going to be a better if you guys listened to last podcast, you know our confusions with them. So we'll try not to confuse them
I
this time.
gasped when you said Marcus Membo. I
But
was
Marcus
like, we're
Membo,
not
right?
doing this.
No. Marcus Membo is like one of those guys who are like, oh man, he's a tackle, but he probably is going to be a better interior guy.
And
Wyatt
Zabel.
Milam, things like that. Zabel, right? They're all playing tackle in college. Armand Membu, the Missouri guy, he is a tackle. He's going to be an offensive tackle. So I have him at 19. I feel comfortable with him being straight up on my offensive tackle board.
Yeah, and we see that similarly. And I think that kind of brings in a little bit of the reservations I have with Banks, whereas like you're getting certainty that Membo and Zabel are moving inside, and then Membu and Connerly are. This is hard, man.
These names suck, bro. Why'd they have to be so similar?
I think they both speak French too, just because of course they do.
I know.
And Connerly on the outside, and then Banks. You know, it's going to depend on who drafts him. But there's three guys that I think, and I think you know which three I'm alluding to, that profile similarly in the group that you just named.
Yep.
And those guys are quite literally 26, 28, and 29 for me. And I guarantee you we see them the exact same way.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't think I've watched enough tape on those three guys, and it's Jalen Walker, Micah Williams, and Shamar Stewart. I don't think I've watched enough tape on those three guys to be like, yes, top 25 guy. And that's not to say that, you know, when it's all said and done after the combine in April, I could have one of those guys at 14. And as of now, I like Shamar Stewart the best of that group. But you're getting a lot of athlete with not a lot of production in that group. And I know there's like the Nolan Smith story that everybody's retweeting that right now, how people question Nolan Smith about that. But there's a lot of other players that haven't succeeded with a lot of athleticism. So it's, you know, it's something that I got to watch those guys more. Full transparency on that. That's just completely why they're not on my board, because with those guys that have the athleticism and not as much of the production, I like to watch more games. Normally I watch 3 games. I like to watch 5 for those guys, just because sometimes it's one game where they put it all together. And if you don't watch that one game, you're in your head, it's a completely different player than somebody else that might watch that game. So I'm pretty sure we're eye to eye on those 3, but I want to hear more about why you have.
Yeah, no, I'll start with Micah Williams, because he's the lowest for me with 20th. I think when you look at Williams, he has the pass rushing ability Mike Green and Abdul Carter have. He just hasn't had the production, right? He's got a bigger frame than both those guys too. He's 6'5", 265. So there's not much concern like, ooh, he's a little skinny. He's a little bit shorter. He has the frame. He has the athletic, the quick twitch ability to do it. And I know you can't scout the helmet, but Georgia guys seem to be pretty dang good. He's gone up against really good competition. I'm not saying that factored in, but it's like, that is one thing. He's going up against a little bit better competition than, say, Mike Green was. You go to Shamar Stewart. This is a dude who just measured like a freak at the Senior Bowl. We talked about him in our Senior Bowl preview. And this guy is super polished at stopping the run. He's going to be a freak 3-down lineman year 1. He's got to learn to have a little bit more pass rush moves. He's more speed the bull type guy. He's got super long arms. It was like 34 and a 1/4 inch arms, which is longer than most tackles. So he's going to, you know, be an absolute freak of nature out there, kind of like we saw Trayvon Walker a couple years ago. And then when you talk about Jalen Walker, this is just a guy who, in my opinion, you get him in the right defense, kind of like what the Ravens did with Kyle Hamilton. It's like, ooh, what does he play? But if you get him in a defense that can fit his needs, he is going to be an electric playmaker. He's going to be able to do a ton of things. He's going to be able to rush the passer. He's going to be able to drop in coverage. He's going to be able to play man coverage on both tight ends and running back. So the versatility of him, for me, is probably what put him at 17. But I agree with you. The production of these guys are probably the biggest concern for me. It's like athletically, what you're getting of frame-wise, you know, and size-wise is no concern. It's just been, man, why have they been a little inconsistent in their careers? Is it, you know, because they maybe have, I don't want to say character concerns, but are they taking plays off? Are they really just in a good conference and they're, you know, not quite as polished? But man, you look at these guys and you say, hey, if you put it all together and get the full package of them, in my opinion, they could be top 15 players, all of them. So I'm high on all 3 of them right now. I would like for their production to be a little bit higher. You just can't go back and do that. So, you know, I think when you watch the tape too, athletically, they jump off the page. It's just like, man, I wish they'd do it every play. I wish they would have done it more than, Shamir Stewart had like 4 sacks in over 1,200 snaps. Just like, man, where's the production from a guy as good as you?
And the Georgia guys in particular, Jalen Walker, who I hope the Cardinals don't draft because I don't want to see Zaven Collins again because that guy should have been good. And Isaiah Simmons, another hybrid guy that they just and Jalen Walker and Michael Williams, though, I will say, I think being on Georgia, sometimes you have to zoom out a little bit and be like, there's so many good football players on the Georgia football team. These guys might not be in the best spots for them on the NFL level, but in college right now, that's the way Kirby Smart lines them up to win the football game. And so like Jalen Walker played a lot of off-ball linebacker, and a lot of people are going to say he's an edge rusher at the next level. And I agree with that. I don't think that means he can never play off-ball linebacker ever again. I think he's somebody that is actually going to rotate between multiple roles. And I think we mocked him to Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. Just, finding a defensive coordinator that can maximize him. And I think that's the case for all three of these guys. And fortunately, I think front offices that know they don't have a defensive coordinator or head coach that'll maximize these guys won't take them. They'll opt for, more higher floor guys, say a Jack Sawyer, while other front offices that are more comfortable in their development will take one of these guys. So those are three, high variability names to watch. Shamar Stewart, I could see being a top 15 pick, and I could see him. Actually, I can't really see him dropping because usually those athletes get taken. So I think that's a good spot for them. So I'll start off with my 15 through 11 here. At 15, I have Kenneth Grant, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. At 14, I have Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. At 13, I have Will Campbell, the offensive lineman from LSU. At 12, I have Jahdae Barron, the cornerback from Texas. And at 11, I have Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, who I'm a very big fan of.
I am not going to lie. I do not have Jahdae Barron or Jihad Campbell in my top 25. So that's going to kind of be all you. We do have a couple similarities in that group, so we'll get there once there. But yeah, take me away on what Jahdae Barron was the best corner in college football this year, right?
Yeah, Thorpe Award winner, Jahdae Barron.
I was like, Maxwell Award? No, Thorpe Award. And then obviously, and then the other one we'll get to is I was a little bit lower on Kenneth Grant than you. And I will say, I think that's probably because I haven't gotten to the D tackle class as much as because honestly, I didn't think the D tackle class was as deep as it was until now. We're like, holy crap, Darius Alexander, all these guys. So I got to get to the D tackle class a little more, and Kenneth Grant will probably climb a little bit. So those three guys are the ones that you can talk about for sure, because we're a little further off on Grant right now, and I don't even have Barron or him in my top 25.
I got 2 D tackles left, by the way.
Just that's so crazy.
So I'll start with Jahdae Barron. He played more inside for Texas in his earlier years, and then they moved him outside this year, and he took off. He was the best cornerback in college football this year. And we'll have 2 guys that play cornerback later on in this list, but he had the best season of all of them. We're not going to let the media hype train tell you that Travis Hunter was the best corner in football this year. It was Jahdae Barron. He put up unbelievable numbers. I can pull them up in a second, but the guy was just absolutely dominant and a cornerstone of why Texas was such a strong defense this year, because it's plagued Texas forever. They can put up 50 points and they might give up 47. The game's going to go to overtime. They might lose. So, Jahdae Barron, he gave up no touchdowns this year. He had 5 interceptions. The guy had a 91 coverage grade on the entire season. You're getting a 23-year-old prospect who has experience playing everywhere in a secondary. And I think that flexibility is going to help him, because I think you can move him around. I'm comfortable keeping him at corner. I don't want to, say, let's move him to safety, but I think he's somebody that can take some snaps at safety. He had 142 snaps in the box this year, 15 at free safety, 122 in the slot, and 680 outside. So you're getting somebody that plays everywhere, 6 foot, 200 pounds, love the frame, love the tape. And, you have to love the production as well. So Jahdae Barron was incredibly impressive for me. And somebody that caught my eye watching, like, just regular college football games, not tape, but I was like, dang, you don't want to throw at 7 on Texas. And then just watching the tape, I'm like, you really don't want to throw at 7 on Texas. So that's Jahdae Barron. And then I'll go into Jihad Campbell, who's kind of a do-it-all linebacker for me. And we talked about Jalen Walker, but I really think Jalen Walker is like edge rusher first, then linebacker, and kind of a move it around type of player. I think Jihad Campbell is a true linebacker at the NFL level, but he brings you so much more. He had 8 sacks this year, 2 PBUs. He had an 88 tackle grade. So this guy had an unbelievable season wrapping up and bringing guys to the ground, doing the number one job that a linebacker has, and an 81 run defense grade. So I think you're getting somebody that can rush the passer, because that's incredibly valuable if you want, delayed blitzes, got to get somebody through the A gap, B gap, up the middle, lining up at depth, just creating all of these disguised looks. I think Jihad Campbell can be a huge part of that. Dropping into coverage, I think he's somebody that'll be very comfortable doing that. I would not be surprised if Jihad Campbell has a huge rise pre-draft. I think right now, if I were to guess, I'd say he gets picked around the 30 to 40 mark. I mocked him in my top 20 at 20 to Denver today. But I think Campbell is the number one true linebacker in this class, because Jalen Walker, I slide over to edge. But yeah, I'm really excited about him. And he's probably going to be a top 15 player for me when it's all said and done. Obviously, there's the 3 guys you mentioned that I said I wanted to watch more tape on. But Jihad Campbell, man, that tape, I think there's one more guy actually that I'll get to. But in relation to pre-watch expectations to where they ended up, Jihad Campbell is second to the guy that I have one spot above him in terms of exceeding expectations.
Interesting. No, I mean, I guess the linebacker one is similar to the running back question, is like,
right, for sure.
How do NFL teams view that? And it's not that he's not a good player. And that's what you're talking about when you're doing a big board, is like, hey, you don't look at, hey, he's a linebacker, so I'm going to bump him down. Some NFL teams might. They're going to be like, hey, we can find a linebacker there. But
that's why Kyle Hamilton gets drafted 14th.
That's true. That's true. So, but no. And then let's see. The other one you had, we're pretty close. You had Will Campbell at 13.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about him. I had him at 11. So we'll get to him. Who'd you have? So you had Campbell at 11. 12 was
Barron, 13 was Will Campbell, 14 was Emeka Egbuka, and then 15 is Kenneth Grant. You want me to go in a little more on Egbuka?
Well, yeah, that's your guy. Yeah. We're only 2 spots off on him. I think we see him eye to eye, but I know that that's kind of your guy.
Egbuka, I think, was the easy eval of this wide receiver class. Like, you get a good blocker, which I did not see right away. I watched 3 games of Egbuka and was like, yeah, I think he's kind of an average blocker. And then I was like kind of looking up, where other people have him ranked, because I like looking at that after I've kind of gone through watching the tape, and they're like, I love his blocking. And I was like, well, I got to rewatch a game. And I rewatched the first Oregon game. And he's just such a comfortable blocker. He's not like Restrepo, who's out there trying to take people's heads off. But Egbuka just knows how to block from the wide receiver position, somebody that you're comfortable running behind, and he just gets open. And I think he's got, so it's really similar to Restrepo, but better frame, better speed after the catch, I think, and just better potential. So I think he's kind of, not that I honestly think he might be closer to Ladd McConkey than Restrepo. And, I think Ladd falls in the middle in terms of the kind of quickness that he has, and the explosiveness after the catch. But Egbuka's frame and Egbuka's hands, I know he had 5 drops this year, but he's so comfortable catching the ball. And I don't think drops are like the biggest deal unless it's like a high number or you're somebody that's relying on contested catches, which is why I kind of don't highlight it as a concern here, and a little bit more of a concern for a Tetairoa McMillan. But Emeka Egbuka, somebody that I'm so comfortable betting on, gets open, catches the ball, productive after the catch. So many different alignments. They used him as a running back on a couple of plays, and then they handed him the football, and he's running for 10 yards. So I just think Egbuka is going to be such a fun player. I think he's going to go to a good football team as well. I think he's going to get drafted in the 20s, maybe the late teens, Steelers, Texans, Chargers. So, those are, 3 teams in that kind of range that I think could take him. Broncos, but Egbuka, really excited about him. My wide receiver 1, and it's a weird change of pace to receiver one at number 14 on the big board.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit weird because Emeka Buka is just super steady. He had Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Jeremiah Smith all in front of him at one point in his college career. And so it's like, holy crap, this dude was always in, competition with a guy who might have a higher ceiling than him. It's not that he was worse than him. It was just like he was legitimately playing with some elite talent at the receiver position. And we all know how Ohio State has been. So that's been a tough one. But okay, so my 15 is James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee. 14 is Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle, interior offensive lineman out of Texas. 13 is Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall. 12 is Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. And 11 is Will Campbell, the interior offensive lineman out of LSU. So I'll start with, do you have Pierce in your top 10?
I have both Pierce and Green in my top 10. Yes.
Okay. So, man, I love James. I'll start off on him. I love James Pierce because, man, this dude was so freaking productive in 2023, and he was still productive last year. He had 8 sacks, but he had 13 in 2023. This dude had a 23% pass rush win percentage this year in college football.
Absurd.
That was second in college football. That was like 2% higher than Abdul Carter. Like, that was a nutty pace, pass rush win percentage. He also had a 10.1% run stop rate. So he, was top 10 in college football. So you're talking about James Pierce. One concern about him, he's only 245 pounds, but if you look at his arms legitimately hang down to his knees. Like, he has long arms. He's going to be another guy that measures incredibly well. And I think he has the ability to put on more weight. I question that with like Abdul Carter and Mike Green. Is like, are their frames maxed out? I think James Pierce can put on more weight easily because of his long arms, because of the shoulders he has. So I think he's elite. And then you talk about Mike Green, who I know we'll get into. That dude just had an impressive season. You talk about not having enough production. He maybe had too much production. You're like, is this fake? Is his PFF possible? Grades? Yeah, like, come on. What was he playing against? 12-year-olds? Like, he was absolutely ridiculous this year. So those two edge rushers are really fun. And edge is a huge position in the NFL, where you just can't have enough edge rushers. You saw the Eagles yesterday in the Super Bowl. Like, you just can't have enough people that can rush the passer. And if you can get home with 4 dudes consistently, it's going to be hard for any quarterback to beat you. So those two edge rushers are in my top 15. And I agree with you. They could easily be in the top 10.
Who did you have higher, Green or Pierce?
I had Green at 13 and Pierce at 15.
Okay, because it's like a coin flip for me. I'll spoil it now because we're about to get to it, but it makes sense just because we're having the conversation right now. So Green is 9 and Pierce is 8 for me.
Okay,
and so it for me it's just so hard to decide back and forth. But I think I like the ceiling on Pierce more just because you mentioned the arm length, and I don't know if we saw him fully maximized because of how deep the Tennessee defensive line rotation is. So there's going to be some talk about, well, James Pierce didn't play as high of a snap percentage per game as some of these other edge rushers. And that's not like a fault to his own. It's just Tennessee had a really deep defensive line this year. It's a testament as to why they were in the college football playoff. And then Mike Green, man, there was a little bit of the scare. I forget what it was, but with the Senior Bowl measurements coming in like too light or too short of arms. But, I think he silenced that pretty quick. One, with weighing in much more than whatever was originally reported, and then just absolutely running right through Josh Connerly's chest and continuing that throughout the week and grabbing his bags and saying, I'm out of here. I don't need to play in the game. So those two edge rushers, it's crazy that we're talking about them like this. They're potential Pro Bowlers, maybe all pros. And I don't really think they have an argument to be number 1 in the class because it sucks to be in the same class as Abdul Carter.
It does. It really does. And then the other guy I kind of want to talk about, because where'd you have Will Campbell?
Will Campbell was 13 for me.
So he's 11 for me. So we're right close there. But I think that Will Campbell's the best pure offensive lineman in this class. Like, you talk about a guy who I am like, who's going to be a staple? It's probably him. I just don't know how high you can take him because he's going to be a guard. I really believe he's going to be a guard. Kelvin Banks can be a tackle for a little bit, maybe a couple years, and then slide inside. I just think Will Campbell's going to be a guard from day one. You might be able to try him at tackle, maybe the Peter Skoronski method, but he's going to be a guard sooner rather than later. And it's just like, when do you want to move him inside, and when can you justify taking an interior offensive lineman there? But he's nasty. He's played over like 2,000 snaps at LSU. He started as a true, like, he's everything you want. He's mean. He's physical. He can be an all-pro interior offensive lineman. And so I think he's kind of the most well-rounded offensive lineman, even though I do have one more ahead of him. He's the most well-rounded one.
And I agree with you in terms of, he's somebody that I would bet on again. We've used this over and over, but it's really rings true in this draft class that has a lot of variability in terms of a lot of guys with potential but no production, or lack of production, and a lot of production, but maybe they lack the physical tools and athleticism that you would like to normally see. And then the top of the draft class is the top of the draft class. But Will Campbell, I think I would move him to guard right away. You touched on the Peter Skoronski thing. I like Campbell as a better prospect than Peter Skoronski, who was drafted 2 years ago out of Northwestern. Campbell's given up 4 career sacks at LSU, and just all around impressive offensive lineman, and just a total mean dude. Like, between the lines, when this guy is on the field with you, like, I would not want to not have introduced myself and been nice to Will Campbell before the game, because God forbid you said something nasty about Will Campbell or he overheard you. He might throw you across the field. He's the type of guy, I can't misquote this because it's the best quote ever. But if you look up what Will Campbell said, and I'm going to try to paraphrase it, but like, if we give up, or if the D lineman gets 1 sack a game, they're like a top 20 pick. And if an O lineman gives up 1 sack a game, we're working at Amazon. Yeah. And so he's just got the mentality to, like, that's what you want from an offensive lineman in between the ears. And he's also going to give you what you want in between the hashes. So I think I'd be really comfortable moving him into guard. You mentioned how high do you take him? And I think, the highest is at 4. You're the Patriots guy here, so I'll ask you in a second how comfortable you are with that, or if you'd rather wait till 38, I think it is. I think Will Campbell, like you talk about 9, the Saints, 10, the Bears, 11, the Niners, maybe that's a little bit of a better spot, better positional value. But I think you're just getting a staple on the O-line if you take Will Campbell at guard. It's just a matter of how valuable guard is.
Yeah. And it's hard, as a Patriots fan, and as a guy who I think our biggest need is tackle, is, hey, do you take this guy at 4? It's probably a little too high. Or if Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter are off the board, do you trade down and feel more comfortable taking him at 8, or trade down to 6 with the Raiders, let them get their quarterback, and then you have him there. So I don't know if I'd feel comfortable taking him at 4, because I think the biggest need is offensive tackle. But if you address offensive tackle in the draft or in free agency, say you take Cam Robinson or someone as a free agent, one of those guys to play left tackle, I'd have no problem taking Will Campbell, because like you said, why would you ever turn down, if you believe he's an all-pro guy, which I think he can be? Yeah, I'd take him up there. So you just need any offensive line help. Like, it's not like the Patriots have Michael Winu, who we're comfortable with. David Andrews is on the back half of his career, but even the interior offensive linemen we've taken the last couple of years haven't been good. So yeah, if they were to address more tackle needs in free agency, I'd feel comfortable with them taking him at 4. If not, it would be a little bit of a stretch.
You think there's like a little temptation too, if they take him at 4 and they don't address tackle, to let him fail over at tackle?
Yeah. I mean, I think he's proven enough at LSU that he can do it in the best conference in college football to let him try. Yeah. And say, hey, we're going to let you do it until you do fail. I just think that he will eventually get kicked in. And so it's like, hey, if you don't address it and this is your solution for year 1, let's say 3 games in, he's not cutting it. Now what's your solution at left tackle? So that would be the hard part for me, but I would definitely give him a chance out there at left tackle.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case with Campbell. Really fascinating offensive lineman. Anytime you have one of these guys like Skoronski or Graham Barton last year at Duke, where he was moved from, tackle and everybody wanted him to play center. So Will Campbell, kind of similar. And then do you have anybody else in that group you wanted to touch on?
No, because I think we'll get to Tyler Warren here. I'm assuming you have him coming up, so I think we'll talk about them all coming up.
Tyler Warren's not in the next group for me.
He's in the following group.
No, he's not in my top 25. No, I'm kidding. Yeah,
I'm like, you're joking.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
We just stop the episode right now. Nope, can't do a podcast with a guy that doesn't think Tyler Warren's
Restart.
top 25. Yeah, restart. Number 10 for me, I mentioned having another interior defensive lineman. It's Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. He's 10. I touched on 9 and 8. Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall's 9. James Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, is 8. At 7, I have Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan. And at 6, I have Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. So we went over the edge rushers a little bit. Nolan, I'm assuming, is the point of question in this group, but I'll let you fire away if you have any questions on
No,
Starks
that's
and Johnson too.
No, that's for sure the point of question, because I actually have Will Johnson at 6 and Malachi Starks at 7. So we just flip-flopped them. We're going to see them high and high. Like it's not that big of a difference. They're both elite talents at cornerbacks and at the safety position. But no, it's got to be, I mean, talk to me about Walter Nolan, because for me, I love Walter Nolan, but I have Kenneth Grant above him in my D tackle rankings, and then I have Walter Nolan, and he's not in my top 25. So I guess, talk to me why you have Walter Nolan at 10 on your big board.
So Nolan was one of the, prize chips in that Texas A&M recruiting class once upon a time. Played 2 years over there, transferred over to Ole Miss, and took off for the Ole Miss Floppers, Ole Miss Rebels this year. He had 6 sacks this year. He totaled 35 pressures, but this isn't an edge rusher we're talking about. It's an interior defensive lineman. He's 6'3". He weighed in at 293 at the Senior Bowl. I was like, what's that event called in Mobile? Can't forget that. He weighed in at 293 at the Senior Bowl, but he does not move like a 293-pound human being does. He carries it and moves like he's 245. And that's not to say that he's like, whoa, I thought he'd be much bigger if he's 293. No, he's bigger, but there's no way he should move as fast and as quick as he does. And I think when we talked about some of those freak athletes that don't necessarily have the production, he's got the production. He had 7 sacks on just 16 pressures in his last year at A&M before transferring. So he's also finishing these plays. So he's not just, getting to the quarterback and not finishing the play. This guy knows how to finish the play, which is a skill. He also had a 92 run defense grade. He collected 32 defensive stops, and just a really, really impressive player. If for the audio only people that can't see the South Carolina flag next to me, I'm a big South Carolina Gamecocks guy, and when they came to play South Carolina, we won't talk about the score, but Walter Nolan had 6 pressures and 2 sacks, and he was everywhere, man. And it's not easy to sack LaNorris Sellers. So, Walter Nolan, really impressive player, and just somebody that I mentioned Jihad Campbell in comparison to where I expected to rank him before watching tape, and Walter Nolan is the guy that I said had the biggest rise pre-tape to post-tape. I think Walter Nolan has the potential to be a top 15 pick, and is, like I ranked him, one of the 10 best players in this class for me right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I already said that I'm not as polished up on D tackles as some positions. So I actually have him.
Class.
He's in. I mean, I haven't organized my 31 through 60. I have names in there. He's at the top. Like, he's sitting right at 33 right now. That's not because that's where I put him. That's just like, hey, these are the guys I need to start getting more into. You talk about, as an interior defensive lineman, having almost an 11% pass rush win percentage and almost a 12% run stop rate. Those are both in like the 95th percentile. He's elite at run stopping. He's elite at getting to the pass rusher. This is a guy that, like you said, he was the #1 recruit coming out of or going to Texas A&M, and then he was a huge piece for Ole Miss. Everyone was like, "Oh, getting Walter Nolan, they could make the playoff. They could win the SEC." Obviously, had a little bit of a down year compared to what they
Florida
thought.
And can't beat Kentucky, but whatever.
Which is crazy. Those are the games that kept him out of it.
Go tweet about it, Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I know. So, but no, this guy has it, and big time recruit, played at Texas A&M, transferred over to Ole Miss, has done everything you want in the run and pass game. So that's a guy that, again, he's sitting towards my 30th. But again, he could jump Kenneth Grant for me. He could easily get to my top 25. But
one more note about the D tackle classes. There's guys like Derek Harmon from Oregon, Omar Norman-Lott from Tennessee, TJ Sanders from South Carolina, a bunch of those guys that like mostly win with pass rush, and then there's other guys like Tyleek Williams and Darius Alexander that are going to win against the run.
Mhm.
And so another kind of pick your flavor group there, but Nolan does both. That's why he's at the top for me, is because once you check both of those boxes and have the frame and the athleticism at D tackle, it's hard to fail. It's honestly hard to fail. And I think that's what Mason Graham, who we'll touch on in a little bit, Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant have in common, is they check both the boxes. So it's pretty easy to rank them.
Totally agree. So let's jump into my 10 through 6. There's going to be a lot of conversation right here. Cam Ward at 10, the quarterback out of Miami. Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State at 9. Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri at 8. And then Malachi Starks at 7 and Will Johnson at 6. So the conversation will come 10 through 9. So where do you want me to start?
Let's start at Simmons, because that's probably the biggest differential. And I can't believe that I said, when I was going over Cam Ward, I said there's some people that have him at 10, and
I literally marked it green on my screen because you said that, and I had him at 10.
That's hilarious. But I'm guessing it's pretty positional value based kind of thing. But if not, bring it home on QB1, because I want to hear about Cam Ward and Josh Simmons.
Okay, I'll start with Josh Simmons because I feel like I am higher on him than most because he's dealing with that injury.
Yeah.
That's my biggest concern right now. If this guy played the whole season, I truly believe he's easily a top 10 lock because he has the size, he has the length. It's the same thing with Armand Membu, with Josh Connerly. He is a left tackle, no question about it. He started 18 games at Ohio State at left tackle. He started 13 games at right tackle for San Diego State before he transferred. He's loose. He's fluid. He has really good change of direction and quickness. He's powerful in the run. He's got that length. He's got good inside hands. I see a lot of Christian Darrisaw, big, powerful, long offensive tackle when I watch him. And Christian Darrisaw has been really good for the Minnesota Vikings. So I get it might be a little bit high for some people right now because of the injury. But like I said, if you're going off a big board and this guy played every year off of talent, or every game off of talent alone, I believe that it might be even low for him. Like, he's not Joe Alt type of prospect, in my opinion, but I would probably have put him similar, if not above, Olu Fashanu last year.
Wow.
Based off of, seeing how he's done. Questions about him is he didn't play against the top competition. He got hurt against Oregon. So he got hurt right at the start of the Big Ten schedule, which would have been awesome to see him because he was dominating some of the lower level competition. And I wanted to see if it translated to the upper level competition. We didn't get to see that. So, there was a lack of focus in some of those games because Ohio State was up by 30 or 40 at points. And it was just like, hey, he probably is out there not really caring. But then once they got into this, Oregon, the game that they lost early in the season by 1 point, he got hurt. So he misses the Michigan game. He misses the Penn State game. He misses all those games where you would have loved to have seen him play.
Run to the national championship.
You would have loved to have seen him play in those. And then obviously the injury is a huge part of it. But I'm high on Josh Simmons. If he can figure out that knee injury and can be healthy, I think that he could be a steal of the draft just because he could be up there in the top 5 picks off of length and size alone if he didn't get hurt.
Yeah, and it's something that's a concern with offensive linemen, especially. Like we touched earlier on Savon Ravel's ACL injury. But corner is more of like a move around position, whereas offensive line, you're relying on the knees a lot. So it'll be interesting to see how his recovery process is going. And I'm sure we'll find out more about that at the combine. But one pressure this year was it 7 games that he played?
Let's see. I had it pulled up right here. It was 7. He got hurt in the 7th.
In the 7th. Okay. So 6 games. And then I think he had like 10 pass rush snaps against Oregon.
Yeah.
So there's one pressure, no sacks given up in those 6th and 8th games. But you mentioned the size, 6'5", 310. I mean, he's a tackle 100%. And so we've talked about, again, this group of offensive linemen where you have questions about guys moving in, staying on the outside. He's another guy. You're comfortable with him cornerstoning your offensive line on the blind side. There's so much value in that. And I agree. Listen, if we saw a healthy Josh Simmons, there's a chance that, I'm grabbing him from my spreadsheet at 25 and moving him over to 5. This is a player that was on the trajectory in his 3rd season of college football, mind you, to be an elite prospect and could still end up being an elite prospect. And I think it'd be dangerous if a contending team gets an injury discount on this guy because he could be a day one starter and start for 10 years if, things work out, health permitting, for Josh Simmons.
For sure. And then you asked about it. Quarterback 1 for me, Cam Ward, have
Sir.
him at 10. Ironically, you happened to just guess randomly where he was on my board. I didn't send it to Max, I promise. He just randomly guessed that number. But for me, I put a lot of stake in quarterbacks that have played a ton of snaps in college football. And this dude's been a 5-year starter. He started at Incarnate Word as a zero-star recruit, went to Washington State, tore it up there, went to Miami this year, and had the year of his life. I mean, you talk about a guy who throws every ball, in my opinion, that you want a quarterback to throw to. He had a 95 deep passing grade of 20 plus yards or more. That was 3rd in college football. If I had to bet on a quarterback in this class, and there's not a lot I'd want to bet on, I think Cam Ward is the guy. I mean, he's smart, he's savvy, he can evade the rusher. I know Shedeur can do that too, but he just looked a little more in control and under control than what Shedeur Sanders did. It helps having Xavier Restrepo out there for him, but I really like what Cam Ward does. I think that he is obviously in contention to go to any of the top 3 teams right there, depending on who's, ready to pull the trigger and who falls in love with him. But he's the one quarterback in this class. Obviously, he's the only one in my top 25. He made barely the top 10 for me. He's the one guy I'm putting stake on. He has experience. He's made a lot of big time throws. He had only a 3.3% turnover worthy play rate, which was tied for 90th in the country. So he doesn't put the ball in harm's way very often. He had a 39-7 touchdown to interception ratio throwing it. Like, he's just a good quarterback, and he proved it for Miami. Too bad, they flaked out and, did not make the playoff, but he put Miami kind of back on the map. So I'm a big Cam Ward fan. I think he's going to have a good NFL career. I don't think he's going to be elite. I don't think he's going to be, top 10, top 5 quarterback. Obviously, he probably would have fallen. I would have put him above JJ McCarthy in last year's class, so probably quarterback 6. Behind Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. But this year, clearly quarterback 1 for me, and the guy that I would take a chance on if I needed one.
So you mentioned the turnover worthy play percentage, and while it is impressive, I think it's also important to note that when he has turnover worthy plays, they are of the catastrophic level. They are throws across the body that, can get returned for touchdowns. They are fumbles against Georgia Tech when they're in the red zone or trying to get a game-winning drive going. And so I think while Cam Ward has games and stretches like, Louisville and Florida, some of the best QB tape you're going to watch. And that's not just in this draft class. Those are some of the cleanest games with some of the most wow throws that you're going to see. Big time throws, as PFF categorizes them. But I think wow throws is easier because it's an audible reaction to Cam Ward making silly throws. So he's got games like that. He's also got games like, some of the Virginia Tech game and some of the Georgia Tech game where, and I guess maybe it's a good thing that NFL teams don't have tech in their name. Maybe he'll, just never have a bad game. But I think Cam Ward's got some of these games that he just didn't put it all together in and let some of those weaknesses that you saw more of at Washington State show through, where I think, he's got really good instincts, but sometimes he's got to understand the sticks, understand that it's 2nd down and that we don't need to give the ball away and that it's not 4th and 5. And I think that'll come with good coaching in the NFL. He's been to 3 schools, so he hasn't had a lot of consistency in terms of coaching in his career. But listen, Cam Ward has the it factor potential in this draft class. And to me, he's the only guy with it factor potential in this draft class at the quarterback position. And he's why he was the only guy in my top 25 at QB and why I think it's totally justifiable to have him at 10.
And the other thing that I like about Cam Ward, to talk about the turnover worthy plays, and although he started for 5 years in college football, he is still younger than Shedeur. He's almost 2 full years younger than Dylan Gabriel, who Dylan Gabriel has started for 5 years, 6 years. He's just as young as Jalen Milroe. He's younger than Will Howard. So he's played a ton of college football. And he's still not even 23 years old at the time of the draft. So he's still a young quarterback prospect, to your point of like, hey, he can grow out of some of those things. And with good coaching, he can maybe reel in some of those turnover worthy plays and not make it as catastrophic. So totally agree with you on that. But I think our 5 through 1 is going to be pretty similar. I think there's only one guy that you're not going to have that I have,
and
based off of where you already ranked him.
And there's going to be one guy that I have that you don't
Yep.
have based on where you already ranked him. Is it 5 for you? Because it's 5 for me.
It's 4 for me.
Okay. All right. So I'm curious to see who comes in at 5, but I think top 4 is going to be the same, and I don't think we're unique in having 4 of those top 5 guys be the same guys. For me,
Yeah.
number 5 is Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. Number 4 is Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State. Number 3 for me is Mason Graham, the interior defensive lineman out of Michigan. And number 2 is Travis Hunter, the cornerback wide receiver out of Colorado for me. And then number 1 is Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State.
Well, I'll just read off mine since we're close, and then we'll get into the discussion. 5 for me is Ashton Genty. 4 is Teteroa McMillan. 3 is Mason Graham. 2 is Abdul Carter, and 1 is Travis Hunter. So, like you said, 4 of those 5 guys are the same. Mason Graham is the same for us, but we did flip our number 1 and 2 players in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. And then you have Ashton Genty at 4. I have him at 5. So we'll start with you. You have Tyler Warren in the top 5. I had him at 12. So talk to us about him, and then I'll talk to us about Teteroa McMillan.
So I think Tyler Warren's just an incredibly impressive player. And it's hard to, I just watched a bunch of receivers, and I'm going through my deep dives on, just going through kind of making as close to final rankings as I'll get before I do some rewatches after the combine. And Tyler Warren was, man, he's really impressive. I think he's got a good release for, being a tight end. And what I alluded to in terms of bringing up watching receivers is you kind of got to adjust your eyes. You're no longer watching 4.3 speed and super fluid movers. But Tyler Warren is as close as you're going to get to that from a full package tight end. So there's some guys in this class that are just going to line up in the slot and aren't as comfortable in line. But Tyler Warren will give you valuable snaps in line, in the slot, out wide, at quarterback, at running back, and at center, like he did against USC when he caught a touchdown on a go ball. I think he brings immense creativity to an offense, but a lot of polish as well. He had drop problems in 2023, pretty much eliminated those this season. He was the heart and soul of the Penn State offense outside of those 2 running backs. Really helped, that step that you saw Drew Aller take, and he needs to take a couple more steps. But Tyler Warren, I think, is going to be an instant starter and an instant success case. I'm not talking about like maybe not the same numbers Brock Bowers has, because I don't think they totally profile the same. But Tyler Warren, kind of, you got to think of that like George Kittle skill set. I think Tyler Warren's got that, and he's got a similar potential. I think this is, not as good of a tight end as Bowers or Pitts, but in that tier below where Michael Mayer, he hasn't panned out the same way, but Tyler Warren's up there for me.
No, and I mean, he's super intriguing. Harold Fannin had a career year for any tight end at 1,500 yards, and it feels like Tyler Warren is a little bit forgot about. He had 1,200 plus yards this year, 8 touchdowns for Penn State.
He still stole Fannon's award, though.
Yeah,
we got to.
He led all of Penn State in receiving by over 500 yards. The next closest guy to his 1,233 yards was a receiver that had 720. Like, no one was even close to him. This was the Penn State offense. Now, Penn State's problem has never been their defense. It's usually their offense, which it seemed to be this year. But he was the heartbeat of that offense. And so, yeah, this is a guy who's going to come in and change a team's offense. He's going to be able to run down the seam. He's going to stretch the field. He had 19 forced missed tackles, which was second amongst tight ends. He had 13 contested catches. He's 6'6". He can go up and catch the ball, box guys out. I agree with you. I mean, Penn State, or when they played Boise State, he had 2 touchdowns, I believe. He had an early one, and then he had another one later in the game. Like, he is just a big time impact player. So I almost feel like I'm a little too low on him. I should probably just go back and watch him.
I mean, 12 is 12. 12 is high.
You're right.
But yeah, he's 5 for me, and maybe that's high. And I'm getting a little bit of crap for mock drafting him to the Jets at 7. But I think he makes whatever team he goes to, makes them instantly better. I think it's
and
instant target.
So I had Brock. This is where it's hard for me. I had Brock Bowers as my 7th best player last year on my big board.
Totally different draft class, though.
Totally. I totally agree with you, right? Like, you look at, I had a Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, and then obviously Drake May, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. And then I had right below Brock Bowers was Jaden Daniels. So you talk about probably all 8 of those guys would be in our top 10 right now. You would maybe keep like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter in there, but so I get it, totally 8. But I guess for me, it's like, it's a little hard for me to be like, holy crap, Brock Bowers was the 7th best player. Brock Bowers would probably be like 2 or 3 in this class for me. How good he is. And so
he was 4 for me, and
okay.
then that's behind Neighbors, Caleb Williams, and Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's hard to put a tight end at 5 and then the year before have one at 4 and say that there's a gap, but there is truly a gap. The 2024 class was just that good, and it helps when you have Neighbors, Caleb, and Marvin Harrison in the same group, which is absurd.
Totally agree. So it's a little bit hard, but I agree with you. He is one of those elite tight end prospects that we've seen come out. Like you mentioned, Kyle Pitts. I know he hasn't had the career you want to, but Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, like those guys coming out of college, he belongs in the same breath as them. So
yeah, and you got to separate the prospect of Pitts versus the pro career
for sure. I mean,
like Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, great prospect. Just
yep,
and doesn't help that Brock Bowers is on his team now.
Yeah, that's crazy that they got both of them, but. Yeah. Brock Bowers is the truth. So I'll talk about Tetairoa McMillan because you had him at 18, right?
19, almost. 19. Maybe he'll be at 18 next time.
Man, come on, bump him up. Give him 17. So, but Tetairoa McMillan for me, 6'5", 212 pounds. I mean, he had over 1,300 receiving yards this year. He had over 1,300 last year, 18 total touchdowns in the last 2 years. I think that he's getting a little bit of a bad rap because Arizona was really good in 2023, but Noah Fifita and that offense stepped back this year. They were not as good in 2024, but he was still super productive. He had, what is that? That's 80 less yards than he did last year on 6 less catches. He had the same amount of targets. This dude's had 260 targets over the last 2 seasons with Noah Fifita. I mean, he's elite. This is what I love about him. Tetairoa McMillan at 6'5" forced the second most missed tackles amongst receivers with 29. How does a 6'5" guy do that? Like that, in my opinion, is crazy good. 29 missed tackles forced for 6'5", 212 pounds. He still is a deep threat. He's not a super quick off the line of scrimmage, but once he gets going, kind of like Mike Evans, he can run past defenders. He can stack them.
Strides.
He has his big long catch radius. He was 7th in contested catches at 18. He's going to be able to box guys out in the red zone. You know, whether you want to throw a fade ball, throw a slant, let him use his body, he can catch it away from him. And not to mention, the dude's a freak athlete. Like he made Bruce, what is it? Bruce Feldman's freak list, I think.
The Feldman freak list. Yeah.
Yeah. And this guy he's talking about, I mean, he might have a 40+ inch vert. I'm guessing it's probably going to be like 36, 37, but still for 6'5", if you're jumping 37 inches off the ground, you don't need to have a 40-inch vert. You're already tall enough. I mean,
he'd be on my pickup basketball team.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine? But since he got to college, he has improved. So this is off of Feldman's Freaks, right? So I'm just reading this off of there. I'm not saying this that like I know it. He came into college running a 19.8 mile per hour. He is now running 21.8. So he's gained 2 miles per hour to his speed just being in a college program. And I still think he has room to grow into his body. He's still a little thin. He's still a little narrow. He could maybe add 5 or 10 more pounds of muscle, get a little bit thicker, and still be as explosive as he is. So I really like Tetairoa McMillan. I know that you like Ibuka and Xavier Restrepo. It is kind of a pick your flavor in this class, but I agree. I think that if you can find an X receiver like Tetairoa McMillan, like Jaden Higgins, they're game changers in my opinion. So that's why I have McMillan at 4.
And the potential sky high there. I kind of touched on it with when I went over him at 19. And I think it's cool that we each got our chance to go over McMillan and some of these other players that we've had more variability on. But for me, it's the separation with McMillan and just having seen players like, you know, a Hakeem Butler, where just a bigger bodied contested catch guy who could create with speed after the catch, just never really were able to take that next step. And, you know, McMillan's a better prospect than Hakeem Butler, who was one of my biggest misses early on in scouting, but, you know, have since learned, but also been a little bit scarred by guys that don't create as much consistent separation. So I think it's a lot of dependency on where he gets drafted, who's coaching him, how are they going to, you know, teach McMillan to take his game to the next level? Because I think no matter which receiver you're drafting, there's something missing. There's not this, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. guy in this class, all of who I would have ranked higher than my number one wide receiver in this class. Maybe as a prospect, Egbuka versus BTJ is a conversation. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. had a great year, but doesn't change the fact that I thought he was, he had a little bit to be desired as a prospect. But no, it's good to hear you have McMillan, and I think, similar to why I think he's got a great potential. And then we have Genty, Graham, Hunter, and Carter. I know we flipped 1 and 2 great players. I think we can fire through some of those guys. I can take Genty and Carter since I had him at number 1,
Yep.
and I'll let you touch on Graham and Hunter. But Genty's one of the best running backs we've seen in a long time. Doesn't help that Bijan just kind of got drafted. I'd still take Bijan over Ashton Genty. But Ashton Genty is 5'9", but he's got a really compact frame, unbelievable contact balance. Nobody forced more missed tackles than he did, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was him and Scadaboo. And Ashton Genty, he's a great blocker. He wins the leverage battle in blocking with his 5'9", 215-pound frame. He's such a dynamic and powerful and punishing runner, but he's not like just a run you over type of guy. He's a run at you and teleport to a different spot on the football field. It's almost a confusing watch sometimes when you're watching Ashton Genty, just like how did he get out of that? And now how is he in the end zone? There's a lot of these best clips from Amarian Hampton and Caleb Johnson and some of these other running backs where they get out of trouble and they get 15 more yards. And Ashton Genty gets out of trouble and gets 15 more yards and then gets out of trouble again and scores. It's a really real pleasure to watch Ashton Genty play. And, it's a matter of how high he goes. I don't see him falling past Dallas.
Yeah, that would be, if he does, I think he'll get snacked up quickly, whoever's back there. But no, he's a treat to watch, man. He was one of the funnest players to watch in college football. So love watching Genty. Mason Graham for me. I mean, you talk about Walter Nolan and these guys. The reason they're so good at defensive line is because they do it both. No one does it better both ways against the run in the past than Mason Graham. He had a 91.1 PFF grade. That was first. He had a 92.6% run defense grade. That was first. He had the second highest run stop percentage at 12%, 7.5 TFLs, the fifth highest pass rush win percentage, 13.8%. And he had 5 sacks, 34 pressures, like great elite get off movement. He has really good lowers, so he's strong at holding the double teams. The only question about him is he doesn't have the elite length and stuff that some of the other guys have. He doesn't have massive arms, but he's polished. He has great technique. He can hold all those double teams. He is going to be a really fun player to watch, and a disruptive D tackle. You saw Jalen Carter, you saw Aaron Donald did. A disruptive defensive tackle can change a defense. Jeffrey Simmons for the Titans when he was rolling, like it's really hard to get one of those guys. And I think Mason Graham has that ability to do that. So really like him. I think that Michigan had a down year this year, but he was a huge part in them winning the national championship in 2023. He still was, like I mentioned, one of the best defensive players in college football. It's just Michigan only won 7 games and didn't even make the playoffs. So it's like he wasn't really looked at in that spotlight as he was in 2023, but still elite player, top 5 in this class.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, the length concerns, you can just watch the tape and Mason Graham answers all the questions there. Abdul Carter was number 1 on my board. It's his first year as an edge rusher after moving from off-ball linebacker, which is absolutely absurd. He is a freak athlete. He moves in ways that he shouldn't be able to move. This guy's bend and just natural instincts for playing the edge rusher position are absurd. He's got great vision. He's going to give you a variety of different alignments because of the off-ball linebacker background. I think the only thing that he's going to have to work on, and I think it should come naturally to him given his athleticism and the fact that he's new to the position, is, creating more consistent disruption against the run. He already brings it, but just more of a nuanced approach is the only real thing I wrote down that I'm looking for from Abdul Carter, and I'd totally be comfortable taking him at number 1, and I think the Titans should.
And if he did all that in 1 year of edge rushing experience, imagine what he's going to do with NFL coaching in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
he's going to be a freak.
Is it wrong to say he's a sure thing? You watch the Notre Dame game where he's playing with one
arm.
It's one of the most ridiculous games. I don't know how many times the broadcasters had to say that he was playing without an arm, but they should have said it more because it's just one of the most craziest concepts to grasp when you're talking about an edge rusher. If you know a guy can't win with one side of his body, and you still can't stop him. He had 8 pressures and 1 sack in that game. It's
Yeah.
against Notre Dame. This is the college football playoff. And Abdul Carter just is Abdul Carter. He's ridiculous. A top player in the class for me, man. And I know he's number 2 for you, and there's not another guy that I would think that could be number 1 over him other than Travis Hunter.
I mean, it's very close for me. I'm starting to
it's
love
really
Abdul
close for me
Carter.
as well.
Like, it might be 1A, 1B. It's not 1 and 2. It's 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter for me is, and I will get into this conversation shortly. Do you think he's a receiver or corner? Like, what are you playing him as?
So it's a little bit more of a loaded question for me. I think straight up, I honestly think he's a better wide receiver straight up.
Okay.
But because of the way the 2 positions are played, and because he's also a very good corner, I would play him at corner full time, and then I would package plays for him at wide receiver, just because I think it's way easier to be a package receiver than it is to be a package DB.
Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying. I have him as, so he would be wide receiver 2 for me behind Tet. He's cornerback 1 for me. I think that what separates him from anyone at either position is his ball skills. If the ball is in the air, it's his ball. Like, it doesn't matter his frame. He is going to make the play. It's his ball to go up and make. And that's what I love about him, whether he's on defense, he's a ball hawk. He's probably going to have 6+ interceptions multiple times in his career. He's going to be able to go up, make plays. His frame is actually really good. Like, I guess the one concern for me is he going to be able to go? He's adamant on going both ways in the NFL. I still don't think he can do that every snap. I agree with you. I think you play him as a corner, you package him in 15, 20 plays in, you put a little script in for him, you put him in big time plays. Even him being out there gives a defense the presence of mind that they have to guard him. And so, I mean, it scares the crap out of me, but could you imagine him going to the Giants? Like, we mocked him in our last mock draft, like him next to Malik Neighbors as a package guy, 20 plays a game and starting at cornerback. Like, it would be almost unstoppable. I think those 2 guys with the ball in their hand, how they, make guys miss, their ability to change direction, get up the field, it would be incredible. So he's my number 1
Stafford throwing them the ball.
Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold,
Jameis Winston.
You
never know.
You never know.
Jameis Winston ever leaves New Orleans.
Yeah, maybe the Giants just take Jackson Dart in the second.
Yeah, hey, maybe. You never know. But Giants fans, let us know.
No, and then on defense, I mean, like I said, he's a corner. He's a willing tackler. He's not afraid to step up in the run game and make a play. His football IQ, I mean, obviously it says it because he's playing both sides of the ball, but I think that him knowing defensively what a receiver's going to do and offensively what a corner's going to do just puts him at that much more of an advantage. So number 1 player on my board. But like I said, I think it's 1A, 1B for me with him and Abdul Carter. I don't think it's, hey, this guy's clearly 1 and this guy's 2. I think it's like, hey, 1A, 1B. If Tennessee took Travis Hunter, I'd be like, great. If they took Abdul Carter, I'd be like, hey, great. They both are number 1 worthy picks, in my opinion, in a class that is a little bit weaker.
Yeah. And listen, this is the top end for me. These 2, I think, are a head above the rest. And that's not a slight at Mason Graham. It's just the fact that we have somebody that's an outstanding edge rusher in their first year at the position. And the generational word gets thrown around way too often, but a player we literally have not seen in a generation.
Yeah.
A player who I think will go both ways, not 100% of the time, but legitimate productivity on both sides of the ball. And I know he wants to go both ways full time. You got to think about Travis Hunter in year 4.
Yes.
Travis Hunter in year 1 might be able to pull it off, but in year 4, how many years maybe are we taking off of the career here because we're playing too many snaps? So at some point, you gotta have the dance with father time and be like, listen, we're gonna try to extend your career here. And I think as he grows older and becomes more accustomed to the NFL game, I think depending on who you're playing, you could say, hey, Travis, you're gonna be 80% wide receiver today and like just a nickel on defense. I think the more experience he gets with the team that drafts him, I think the more options you have. It is truly a one of a kind of player. And I think it'll be a coach's dream as long as he doesn't get overcoached, which would hurt to see. But Travis Hunter is unbelievable.
And I guess the other thing for me is he's played over like 1,400 snaps the last like 2 years. So like over 28, almost 3,000 snaps in 3 years of college football. And I know he played at Jackson State for the first couple and then at Colorado. It's like, I'm not saying he's hurt, and I'm not saying it's any question, but like you mentioned, what's he like in year 4? Because he's already played like double, if not triple the amount of some of these guys coming out of college.
Is it like he's played 6 years if he plays 3? Like
kind of
just going both ways is really tough for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah. And the wear and tear, right? It's not that he's not tough or whatever. It's just the wear and tear of getting hit at the corner position, or, there's a ton of soft tissue injuries as a corner, whether it's hamstrings, groin, stuff like that. And then as a receiver position, if you're not protecting yourself, or you could take one hit over the middle of the field, you can get hurt. And so it's just, that's where it's like, hey, yeah, I agree with you. In year 4, when now he's played 5,000 snaps in the last 6 years because he's been going so many different ways, what's his body like? It's not that he can't hold up. It's like, hey, I want this guy, if he's a number 1 or 2 overall pick, the last 10 years for us, not 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So that's my concern right there. But he has a generational talent. I don't know if we'll ever see it again.
No, me neither. And I think we kind of landed in the same camp where we think he goes both ways, meaning he plays offense and defense in the same game every game, but not every play. We don't have the energy to read back to you our top 25 big boards. We'll do that.
Maybe we'll post it on. Do you want to post it on your Instagram?
I can, maybe I'll give everybody 2 days to listen to it.
That's a great idea
over here. And then we'll post it, whether it's a story or make a post, so you guys can have that kind of visual to see our top 25 big boards. But yeah, let us know if you guys like this format of us reading off in 5 player increments, and then, kind of trying to highlight every player. Before draft time, we'll bring you a much bigger big board, one that will be able to, not have the conversation of I haven't watched enough of this guy, but that's, kind of the reality when we're not full-time draft analysts in the month of February.
Wait, you're not? You're not?
Not at all.
Get on this level. Come on, man. You have a day job?
It's called being a student.
That's a dumb job. Yeah, no, same here. No.
Let us know if you guys liked the format here. Who's too high, who's too low. I'll post about it on the old Instagram story. So make sure you're staying in tune over there, and then maybe we'll get that visual for you guys. But thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of the Draft Geeks podcast. For Jace Campbell, I'm Max Showstack, and we will see you guys next time.